Hey everybody, so today I just want to respond to one thing. First, Unacceptable Babbitt has left a comment on my YouTube video, The Quickest Debate Ever. Unacceptable Babbitt, I'm guessing you're going to be watching this. You asked, since unfertilized eggs are technically humans developed at a different state, does that mean we should fertilize every single one and make as many people, because that's what they would want? I didn't quote you exactly, but you said something like that. And the first thing is, I wouldn't call an unfertilized egg a human developed at a different state, because no development process has started yet. You can't really call it a human developed at a different state if it hasn't even begun to develop yet. Also, I could just likely use what about the sperm cell? I could just easily say that's a part of me. See, you need a sperm cell and an egg cell to make a human life. I'm going to say the sperm cell is not a human life. I'm going to say the egg cell is not a human life, because no human life has ever been brought about by just one of them. You can't make a yin-yang symbol with only the yin or only the yang. Once you put them together, though, you have the yin-yang symbol. To me, a sperm cell and an egg cell are the yin-yang of life. Once the sperm cell and the egg cell have collided, well then, the process of human life has officially begun. And this is what I found works best against atheists. I'm not using the potential for human life argument. I'm not using the it's a human life argument. I'm using the how would you feel golden rule argument. If I was to say to you, okay, sperm cell and the egg cell have officially met, and now the process that will eventually make you has started. Would you like this process to be halted? And you think to yourself, no, because then I wouldn't be here. And you'd be right. But if you try doing this with the question, would you have liked your... how would you feel if someone crushed the egg cell that was eventually going to make you? And see, to me, I would have a lot of questions. Were you ever going to fertilize the egg cell? In your comment, yes, you would have. What about my parents? What's my life going to be like afterwards? Also, bottom line is, I wouldn't say that that's an I. Like, how would I feel about that? There's no I. There's not even a potential for I. Until the sperm cell meets the egg cell and the process of my life has officially begun. Because if the process of my life has officially begun, and you just come along and stop that, well, geez, thanks a lot, jerk, because now I'm not going to be here. But there was never even, but just me as a sperm cell, just me as an egg cell, I wouldn't even call that me at that point in time. I see you met Sarah, too. Sarah, don't scare this one away, okay? Sarah can be a handful, but she's a nice person. No. What I said when I was referring to willful ignorance, I was referring to something terrifying. Erased history. In essence, or in the case of this video, Jesus deniers. It's only gotten worse, people. At a scholarly level, respected scholars, and generally anyone who knows what they're talking about, knows Jesus Christ was at least a historical figure. Even one of the few atheists who I still like after my conversion to Christianity, Bart Ehrman, acknowledges this. But what are some of the flaws with denying Jesus to be a historical figure? Well, before we touch on that, let's talk about skepticism. skepticism is a good thing. One, because you're protected against tomfoolery or being fooled, and plus it shows you're still open-minded. But then we see that if Halloween candy has taught us anything, this is too much of a good thing. Cosmic skeptic, armored skeptic, there's every other atheist out there is skeptic something. So it's becoming more of a trend than actually being about being skeptical. See, I actually took a law class at one point in time, and it defied the goal of every lawyer to prove somebody guilty or not guilty, quote, beyond a reasonable amount of doubt. In other words, if you're a lawyer, you want to either try proving something or disproving something beyond a reasonable amount of doubt. You can never disprove or prove something. But if you have a reasonable amount of doubt, well, you would have a reasonable reason to believe something. A movie I once watched when I was a kid, around Halloween time too, was a movie called Scooby-Doo on Zombies Island. And as much as I loved that movie as a kid, I think David Wood beat me to it, because he already made a video about this. But either way, I never thought of putting it this way, but in the movie, zombies start coming out of this island that Scooby and the gang is on, and Fred is reasonably skeptical of this because every other monster before this has been a man in a mask. However, as the movie progresses, it becomes more and more obvious these are actual zombies, not men in a mask. Having said that, Fred does not want to admit he's wrong. He starts out with, it's a man in a mask, to, it's a hologram, to it's an animatronic, and at one point in the movie, when Fred is just refusing to believe, Daphne turns around to Fred and says, "You're not a skeptic, you're in denial." And I thought to myself, if anybody ever perfectly summed up how I felt about Jesus deniers, flat earthers, or anti-vaxxers, or any radical atheists at all, it would be Daphne from Scooby-Doo. Because they're not skeptical. They're suffering from denial. But let's just look at some of the three things that Jesus deniers like to say to discredit a historical Jesus. The first one, making the claim that we have nothing but 14th century text to go off of. This is generally not true. There are little bits and pieces or fragments of text from earlier, but nothing complete and whole. When it comes to the Gospels, generally what we have completed is 14th century copies of the Gospel. And of course, this is where the atheists would love to point out that the Gospel could have been corrupted, or things like this, or things like that. And to these atheists, you would have to wonder if they ever heard of this thing called textual criticism. In one breath, the atheist, the Jesus denier, will sit there and say, we can't know anything for sure, it was so long ago. But in the same breath, they'll tell you that we can know for sure that some things about the Gospel were changed. Well, textual criticism, the same way we know how things in the Gospel were changed, are about the same way we would know whether or not the 14th century texts are reliable. If you're a scribe writing something down in, say, Africa, and you decide to change one of the Gospels, and that change that you just made to the Gospel is not going to show up in a Gospel being recopied in Greece. So that's how we can spot errors. And another thing they like to say with this is that since all we have in full is 14th century text, then that means that we can't actually know anything about Jesus, in other words, they're unreliable. But if that's the level of skepticism, doubt, denial, oh, excuse me, got a cold. But if that's the level of skepticism that you're going to adopt, then we can't know what Homer taught, we can't know what Aristotle would have taught, we can't know what Plato taught. We're going to have to end up saying we don't know a lot about anything. Are you going to sit here and say we can't be sure about what Homer taught? About what Plato taught? Aristotle? No? Well, and you shouldn't say it either about Jesus, because the only reason you would have for that is purely bias. Number 2. There is no written copy of King Herod killing children. This is different from every other claim made by Jesus deniers, because this is the only one of the 3 I'm going to talk about that actually seems to be a good argument. It says that King Herod in the Bible killed a bunch of children when he found out that the Messiah was supposed to be coming. And there's no written documentation of this. Now, usually the way it's presented by atheists is that King Herod killed hundreds of children, wiped them all out, and there certainly would be a historical record of this if this actually happened, right? Yes, except no, because that's not even what the Bible says happened. King Herod in the Bible killed all children between 1 and 2, I think it was, and he did it within his jurisdiction, which, if I can remember, I listened to a scholar say was about the size of that little land, that little tab of land off of New York State. So ask yourself, how many children between 1 and 2 were alive at the time that his jurisdiction could touch? And I believe one person pushed it about as far as, at its most extreme, 50. This isn't hundreds of children, this is 50. So one reason this could not have been documented is because it just wasn't impressive enough to be documented. These Roman people were obsessed with killing people all the time. We still to this day don't know exactly how many people were put to death by the Romans, because they killed so many so fast we just don't know. Another thing is that this event may have been overshadowed because shortly after this event is said to have taken place, King Herod killed a bunch of Jewish leaders. And as a historian, which would you rather write about? Him killing some kids or him killing a bunch of Jewish leaders? Seems like the one that sticks out more would be the Jewish leaders. And the very other thing is that, other than that, we have practically every reason to not doubt the King Herod story about him killing children. It could have just not been important enough that any historian would have thought to mark it down, or it could have been overshadowed by him killing all the Jewish leaders, or both. I think, who was it that died? Mother Teresa's death was overshadowed by, I believe it was Princess Diana's, because Mother Teresa died, but at the same time, Princess Diana died some time earlier, and everyone was so obsessed with Princess Diana dying that everyone kind of forgot about Mother Teresa. It wasn't really the talk of the town, like Princess Diana. So historical events sometimes do overshadow each other. And the third and final biggest reason is to believe that Jesus Christ existed, at least as a historical figure. Now, I'm going to sound like a broken record when I say this, but simply because it's just the smart thing to do. Think about it. You would have to say that the Jews were lying, the gospel writers made it up, they were willing to die for a lie, and that all the historians just took the gospel as its word and are pretty much just crap historians. One other thing is that Titicus, I'm probably butchering that name, but he was actually a Roman politician along with a historian. You know, I can't imagine, unless he's a complete idiot, that he would only take the gospel at its word, instead of checking around with a few of his fellow Romans first. And if you want some more into that, you can watch my video reply to John Brown. It's, I don't want to repeat myself here. This has gone on long enough. Either way, there you have it. Corrupted history. Perhaps one of the scariest things to think about this Halloween. You won't believe how many people I get that are like, there's no evidence to suggest that any historical evidence for the Bible or any historical biblical event is actually true. And it's like, oh my God. You ever play chess with someone who doesn't know what en passant is? And then when you try doing en passant, they accuse you of cheating? It's like, no. Your lack of knowledge does not mean I'm wrong. And that is my message to Jesus deniers this Halloween. Yeah, John Brown, that means you.